The Deadhead Doll, a project years in the making, inspired by 18th century history, cultures, and thoughts about death. For several years now, I've been studying early American artwork. The artwork created by colonists is as fascinating to me as any fantasy world. The colonists' life was uncomfortable and often brutal. Their possessions were needed to work and survive, but they were made as artfully as any contemporary artist would. Memento Mori was a common notion on the frontier. Illness, predators, and seemingly endless war was always around the corner. Based on the representation of Memento Mori on folk art of the time, this work combines a lowly colonist with his flintlock rifle with the modern notions of the headless horseman or other modern representations of death with his cloak and scythe. The first iteration of this piece was a simple pencil sketch in my sketchbook. I created this on an early January morning in 2021. I specifically remember waking up at about 4 in the morning, unable to sleep. I made a pot of coffee, and after months of not using my sketchbook, I sat down on the couch with my cup of coffee on the table and began working in my sketchbook. My research into America in the 18th century led me to study more and more the concept of death, loss, and mourning, and how it was portrayed in an era of much more hardship than any of us today could endure. One of the more permanent art forms we have left from colonial America is the gravestone. They have worn over time, but still give us a wonderful insight into the lives of their owners and the art of the era. When discovering this art form for myself, my wife and I are going through a long, hard year. The loss of our unborn son, a family pet, and countless hours of thought about the state of the world had drained me of much more happiness than I care to admit. As I look back over the years of 2021 and 2022, I find comfort in the phrase repeated all over books, drawings, and gravestones that I've studied. Memento Mori, remember that you die. It may sound or feel morbid, but it hasn't always been a reminder of the end. Some of the earliest gravestones in the eastern United States remind us that life is not eternal and that there is peace after we die. This idea is reflected in the stones. Angels and cherubs float above the stones with flowing robes and trumpets, announcing the entrance of another soul into a world of no pain and no suffering. Fruit trees are in abundance, representing the tree of life in the Garden of Eden and the cyclical nature of life and death. It wasn't until later, from my observations into the mid to late 1700s, when we saw some more of the contemporary portrayals of death, the morbid and perhaps scary ideas that we see today. Trees and angels became smaller, giving ways to bones and hourglasses. We see bats held back by angels, weeping flowers, and most prominently, the winged skulls that have inspired me here in 2023. I find an odd peace with the artwork on these stones. The people beneath these stones were loved by someone. They lost loved ones themselves. When I stumbled onto stones made for children, it hurt. Perhaps this is just the rambling of a young man coming to terms with his mortality. Maybe I'm assigning too much importance and connection to some 200-year-old carvings. I don't really know. But for me at this time, there's something important about these connections and the constant they represent. Memento Mori. If you enjoy this kind of work and would like to see some work from those who inspire me, I encourage you to check out the work of Eric Ewing, Ian Pratt, Jeff Luke, and Ken Scott, to name a few, each of whom are creating contemporary artwork inspired by the work of our ancestors to tell new stories and continue a wonderful tradition.
The young, the rich, or poor, all alike with me, you know. No wealth, no land, no silver, no gold, nothing satisfy me but your soul. Oh death, can't you spare me over till another year? Oh death, please spare me over till another